Welcome back to the FTN NFL Team Preview Series. I'm your host, Mike Randle. Follow me on X at Randle Randle. As always, we are sponsored by the great Boom Fantasy. Boom Fantasy is the only place to go for daily fantasy sports action. You have the most innovative games for the hardcore, the casual fan. You can win up to 500 times your entry only at Boom Fantasy. You can download it the App Store and Google Play and use that promo code FTN. You get a no-sweat bonus up to $100. And today we go back to Chicago. And why would we go back to Chicago? Hall of Fame game kicked off. Super exciting against the Texans. We got Jacob Infante, the only person I go to for Bears information on X at Jacob Infante 24. He's the lead NFL draft analyst, and he does Bears blogs for Windy City Gridiron. We have him in here. What did we learn, Jacob? Let's get right to it. Hall of Fame game. I'm going to be out in Canton for the Fantasy Football Expo this weekend. Tell me what I should have learned last week before I arrive in Canton.
Yeah, so, as always, it's a pleasure to be here. I think that looking at the Hall of Fame game, there's definitely a lot to be excited about with the Bears. I think that it really shows that one thing in particular, there's an actual battle at QB2 in Chicago. And I think some people were surprised a little bit prior to the Hall of Fame game when they saw, oh, it's Tyson Bagent or Brett Rippon being listed as the second string QB. It's not one or the other. And I think with how Rippon performed in the Hall of Fame game, 3 touchdowns, no picks. I think he was 11 for 15. Threw the ball very well. And obviously, it's the preseason, so one game's not going to, make or break anything for a veteran like that. But I think it shows that behind Caleb Williams, it's not necessarily set in stone who's going to be the second stringer. So I think that's the one thing I'm going to be looking forward to the most. And the Bears still have 3 more games left, with this being the week 0, so to speak. So it's going to be exciting to watch that. And I feel pretty good. And I'm sure we'll get into it later, but the run game in Chicago, I feel very strongly about as well.
Yeah, what's funny about the run game, of course, all of us are dying here, Jacob, to get some sort of DFS fantasy action going. So our FTN Discord was hopping with how Demetric Felton has to be the play for the Bears. But right off the bat, we saw Roschon Johnson. We saw Khalil Herbert. So talk about the backfield here and how you see this shaking out, because I don't see a situation where 3 are playing in week 1. So could there be a trade? We had talked about that earlier. What do you think it is? Clearly Swift is the one, but I have to admit, I was surprised, maybe you weren't, to see Roschon Johnson start that game.
Yeah, so I'm honestly pretty curious to see what's going to happen with the Bears running back room, because you signed DeAndre Swift. He's going to be the starter. He's going to be the main guy in that backfield. But you have Roschon Johnson, who was highly touted out of Texas, looked really good in the first preseason game. Khalil Herbert has been one of the more efficient runners in the game for most of his NFL career from like a yards per carry perspective. There's a lot to like there in those 3 alone. Then you mentioned Demetric Felton. You mentioned that there's Ian Wheeler, the speedster running back out of Howard. They signed an undrafted free agency. Travis Homer's a guy who made the team last year. He's a more experienced special teamer. So I'm pretty curious to see, is Roschon going to be that second stringer? And if not, then, Khalil Herbert's in his last year of his rookie deal, but he's still a good running back. It's just a matter of the Bears have one better running back in DeAndre Swift. And if they think Roschon's better, then it would make sense to consider a trade. It's not going to be anything massive. Like, it would probably be like a 6th or a 7th round pick or some sort of pick swap, nothing too fancy, but I do think that Herbert's a talented running back. Honestly, I'd try and buy low with Khalil Herbert, which, I'm not investing a ton of money in him. Like, if I'm drafting for the first time now for my leagues, I'm not, using him anything more than like the last or the second to last pick or anything like that. But he's shown he can be a quality running back. He can be a solid producing starter. And even if he doesn't have that high-end receiving value, which, Swift's a better pass catcher, Roschon's a better pass catcher, he's still a good enough runner that he's going to produce, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's somewhere else. So I think that I'd lean Roschon's going to be the running back too, just because that's where the momentum seems to be here in Chicago. But ultimately, you have 3 really talented running backs, and that's not that's not a bad problem to have.
Well, talk about who's going to be blocking in front of them, Jacob. And I'm not going to bust you, as I saw on social media, about asking who's going to be at center and do they need a center. But talk about the offensive line, which I thought looked improved here, gave some time to the quarterbacks to make plays for the new all-pro wide receiver, Colin Johnson, of course. But talk about this offensive line here and how you think it's going to come together for week 1.
Yeah, so the preseason was interesting to me just to see that Hall of Fame game, how the O-line held up. No sacks allowed, only 3 quarterback hits allowed. I mean, it was a pretty good outing, all things considered. Run blocking, maybe a little inconsistent on the interior, but there are definitely some flashes there. I think that, this is just me. I think the starting 5 is going to be different from what I think it should be. I think that at this stage, I'd start, Braxton Jones, left tackle, Darnell Wright, right tackle. I don't think that's going to change. Tevin Jenkins at left guard, I don't think that's going to change either. But center and right guard, I'm really interested in because Coleman Shelton was a solid starter for the Rams last year. Ryan Bates has shown some promise, and the Bears obviously felt a certain way about him to be willing to trade for him. And then Nate Davis there's 3 solid years of starting tape at Tennessee, but last year he wasn't very good. Availability has been a big issue for him. Honestly, I'd keep that right guard spot open. I think that Davis is going to start the year there, and probably Coleman Shelton is going to start at center, if I had to guess. But I wouldn't be shocked that if at some point Ryan Bates steps in at right guard. So that in itself is going to be interesting to see how long of a leash are they going to give Nate Davis, because last year was disappointing by the standards that, not only he set for himself with the Titans, but also for the contract that the Bears signed him to. And then, this year he's had issues with availability and practices and things like that. And it's already, it's rubbing a lot of people the wrong way. So obviously from a Bears perspective, you hope he can pull it all together, but there are definitely reasons to be concerned at this point. So I think he'll start off at right guard, and then Shelton, I think, wins at center. But I wouldn't be shocked if Ryan Bates finds his way into the starting lineup at some point.
Did you find any information out on the defense? Defense last year, per Aaron Schatz here, DVOA, ended up finishing 17th in DVOA, but an impressive 6th best against the run last year. Actually had a better run defense per DVOA than Baltimore and Tampa Bay. So talk about what you learned, maybe what you saw a little bit behind the scenes or at practice, and what you can think we should expect for the defense here as we head into their 2nd game of the preseason.
Yeah, so I'll admit I'm still a little bit concerned about Chicago's pass rush. Montez Sweat's a Pro Bowl player. He's a very good starting edge rusher, but outside of that, they haven't really gotten a proven pass rusher. And that's something I wish they did or found a way to do this offseason. It's definitely something they're going to have to try and prioritize in 2025. So you've got defensive tackles. I think Javon Dexter has, he's looked really good in training camp. There's a lot of buzz around him making a year 2 jump. I think he's certainly capable of that. But even then, Andrew Billings is he's a high-end rotational guy. He's, I guess a lower-end starter. He's serviceable. He's definitely someone who deserves to get snaps. And then Zach Pickens along the interior, there's reason to, for him to think, okay, he can get better, but he didn't have a great rookie year. He hasn't really stood out in camp. And then that other edge rusher spot, I'm a little bit concerned about. I think they're going to have to make some sort of move there, whether it's go into free agency to see who's still available or make some sort of midseason trade. But the rest of the defense I feel really good about. I think TJ Edwards is, I'd argue, a top 10 linebacker in the NFL and a top 10 off-ball linebacker in the league right now. Tremaine Edmonds has certainly played at a top 10 off-ball linebacker level in the past. He didn't last year, but I am confident that, another full year in the system, I think he's got a chance to really improve. And the secondary, there's a lot of reason to be excited about in Chicago. It's young guys who are all on the up and up. And then it's a free safety. You're bringing in Kevin Byard, who should, in theory, be an upgrade over Eddie Jackson. So the cornerback room is strong. And in the preseason, I was impressed with the secondary too. I think in that Hall of Fame game, you're seeing at corner, especially Reddy Stewart, an undrafted rookie out of Troy. He looked really good, and he's been good in camp. He's been getting first-team reps in the nickel with Kyler Gordon out. Josh Blackwell has played in the nickel as a backup in the past. He looked good in the Hall of Fame game. He's a special teams ace. And then Terrell Smith, the second-year 5th-round rookie out of Minnesota. I mean, there's a lot of tools. There's length. There's athleticism. There's physicality there. So I feel really good about the Bears defense. I don't think they're going to be elite. I just think the lack of a pass rush is going to hurt them at times, but they'll defend the run again well like they did last year. I think they'll be good in coverage again like they were last year. It's just a matter of, all right, the ceiling is a little bit capped just because Montez Sweat, he's very clearly the guy you focus on. And then if you get the one-on-ones, like, is Dexter going to be that guy to step up? Is Pickens going to develop into anything? You sign Yannick Ngakoue. Is Austin Booker going to stand out? Is, DeMarcus Walker going to be anything? So a lot of questions on the defensive line, but I think they'll defend the run well. I think the linebackers are good. The secondary is good. Should be an above average defense in Chicago this year.
Great stuff as always, Jacob. Last question, we'll get you out of here. Game 2, second preseason game of 4 coming up on Saturday at Buffalo here. Curious how you think the starters on offense will play, how you think that could happen. Brett Rippon, 11 of 15, 166, and the 3 touchdowns for the Bears in the Hall of Fame game. Herbert, 4 carries. Johnson, 6 carries. Felton had 3. And, of course, with the receiving, Colin Johnson, the 2 touchdowns looked fantastic with those jump balls. Tommy Sweeney, BC represent, thank you, Jacob, had the touchdown as well. So any chance we see some more of the starters? You think they'll save them for the 3rd game? How do you think Saturday's going to play out with some of the more foundational pieces for the Bears here this year?
Yeah, so I feel like you're going to see some of the starters in some capacity against the Bills. I mean, I think Caleb Williams is going to get some sort of playing time, even if it's just a drive or 2, just to give him some sort of reps. I think would be beneficial to him. And if you're looking at say you can get 1 long touchdown drive or a field goal drive, or say for whatever reason the offense doesn't do super well, then you bring him out for a 2nd drive. I think that's probably the full extent of what you're going to see out of Caleb, honestly. Give some opportunities for, someone like Odunze to get playing time, but I think some of the more like solidified veteran guys, like a Montez Sweat, like Keenan Allen, Jalen Johnson, DJ Moore. I don't think you're going to see a ton of those guys, but I do think some of the younger guys, maybe the offensive linemen, Darnell Wright, Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, you might see a little bit of them too. But yeah, no, all things considered, I think it's going to be mostly out of the starters we see in Chicago playing against the Bills. I think it's mostly going to be the younger guys, and then some of the more established, solidified names are probably going to sit this one out. But yeah, from a starter perspective, probably just going to be 1 or 2 drives is my guess.
If you're not following Jacob Infante, ask yourself, why not? At Jacob Infante24 on X, lead NFL draft analyst and Bears blog for Windy City Gridiron, my always go-to person. Great information, great insight as always. I'll be at the expo having a beverage, Jacob, seeing all your notes and everything that you put on about the game. Really looking forward to it. Thank you so much always for joining us and recapping the Hall of Fame game and previewing the rest of the preseason coming up.
Love it. Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks, Dave.
The NFL Team Preview Series is sponsored by Boom Fantasy, your top choice for daily fantasy sports action. Boom Fantasy has the most innovative games that cater to both casual and hardcore fans. Win up to 500 times your entry only at Boom Fantasy. Download now on the App Store and Google Play. Use promo code FTN to get a no-sweat bonus up to $100.